I met Dennis Grady around the time we were planning World Youth Day 2002. He had formed a group called Franciscan and Friends to perform at a local Toronto Franciscan parish. Little did we know that it would grow into a significant ministry and that Dennis and I would share a deep friendship over the next 20 years. Dennis was a natural bridge builder, always speaking with everyone, sharing Jesus Christ, just as comfortable with a bishop or a homeless person. He was a pioneer in Catholic music in Canada, a Third Order Franciscan, and spent years working with adults with intellectual disabilities at L'Arche. He loved taking his guitar to the First Nations Reserve outside Calgary, where he was a friend and mentor. With Franciscan and Friends, Dennis took music mission trips to the Caribbean and Mexico, where he was supposed to go in December. He invited me, but I couldn't join, only to learn later that he had been hospitalized and couldn't go either. Typical Dennis, he never mentioned it. The last time I heard from him was a photo of the group in Mexico with "Hola from Mexico" written on it. 3 weeks later, he died. We will miss you, Dennis. Thank you for the music, the friendship, and for showing us how to follow Christ in the footsteps of St. Francis. Adios, amigo. We'll see you on the other side. I'm Deacon Pedro, and this is the Salt and Light Hour. Hello and welcome to an all-new Salt and Light Hour. I'm Deacon Pedro, and sitting here with me is Sister Marie Paul Curley. Sister, welcome back. It's good to see you.
It's great to be back in 2025.
2025. I know, it's like we did Advent and Christmas, and we're almost now at Lent.
Can you believe
it? It's incredible. And I think we have the same conversation every year.
Probably. Sorry about that,
yes.
Listeners.
But of course, you're here today because the Academy Awards are coming up. And so you always have something to say.
Yes. I want to talk about a particularly Catholic film,
One particular
I think, this
film.
time. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll bring that up in a moment. So today we're also going to be joined by Ed Clancy of Aid to the Church in Need USA.
Oh, yes.
With their segment that they do once a month, Where God Helps. He wants to tell us about the situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Again, like these are the news that are not in the news.
Exactly.
And also what's happening in Syria. Syria has been in the news because they had a change in, if we can say that, a change in government. The Assad regime has fallen. So we're going to get a little bit of an update from the DRC and from Syria. And that's in about 5 minutes, Where God Helps, with Ed Clancy from Aid to the Church in Need. And then, Sister, so I don't know if you wanted to tell us a little bit more, Windows to the Soul, to one particular film that you think is going to win all the awards, or what is...
I don't, it's so hard to tell this year. There's the awards leading up to it are going in all different directions. So
okay.
I'm not sure what's going to win, but the reason I want to talk about Conclave is because a lot of people feel that it gives them an inside view of the church. And I want to talk about that. What's true about it? What's not? What can it show us? Where do we as Catholics need to talk about the church a little bit differently so people understand what the church really is?
I'm excited to talk about Conclave. So that's coming up with Sister Marie Paul, Windows to the Soul, in about 15 minutes. And then, Sister, I know that you're familiar with the Rosary.
I would hope so.
I don't know. Is that part of your Pauline charism that you pray the Rosary as a community?
Well, actually, it's recommended to pray it every day. Of course, we don't always pray it together every day, but we do often pray it together. Yes.
Okay. So, have you heard of the Rosary in the Year podcast?
Yes, I have, but I haven't listened yet. So.
Okay. Well, good. So. Today, we're going to be speaking with Father Mark Mary Ames, who hosts the podcast. And people might be familiar with the Bible in the Year, or Catechism in the Year. So this is the new one from Ascension Presents, the Rosary in a Year podcast. People are confused. Like, does that mean that we're going to get to pray the Rosary with Father Mark Mary every day? It's not really that, but Father Mark Mary will tell us all about it, how it works, and why they wanted to do it. So that's in about 25 minutes. Father Mark Mary Ames, he's going to tell us all about the Rosary in the Year podcast. And then we're going to reconnect with a Canadian singer-songwriter and liturgical composer, John Dawson. I don't know, sister, if you came across John Dawson when you lived in Toronto.
Yes.
Yeah. So John is one of the composers who wrote one of the 3 Canadian mass settings that were approved by the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops 15 years ago with the new mass translation. So John has a new album called Outlier. And so that's a great excuse to bring him into the show, and we can talk. I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about that mass translation. I can't believe it was 15 years ago.
I can't either.
But we're going to talk about his music is very acoustic, folky, jazzy sometimes. He's a guitar player by trade. And so it's a great album, Outlier. So looking forward to speaking with John Dawson about that in about, 35 or so minutes. If people are not going to be able to be around because you're driving or you need to continue listening to the show when you get home, you can do so at our website, slmedia.org, and also on the new Salt and Light Plus app, SL Plus. So let's start with a song just to get us in the mood. Here's John Dawson with Have a Little Faith from his new album, Outlier.
Sometimes a little faith is all you need to get you through. But sometimes having a little faith feels like more than you can do. You just know that you lost some, but you don't know where it's gone. But you know that you need to get it back, to have the strength to carry on. Sometimes a little prayer is all you need to get you through. But sometimes that little prayer feels like more than you can do. Listen closely and you'll hear some stirring deep within your soul, telling you to sit back, open your heart, and just let it go.
We're listening to John Dawson with Have a Little Faith from his new album, Outlier, and we're going to be speaking with John Dawson in about 35 minutes, so stay tuned. And now it's time for Where God Helps with Ed Clancy from Aid to the Church in Need, USA. Ed, welcome back to the Salt and Light Hour. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Deacon. It's always good to be with you.
So, you wanted to tell us about what's happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We speak about them often.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's a country, a region of Africa that has been in turmoil and problematic for many, many years. Mm-hmm. And as always, the church is in the trenches and on the front lines of all of these problems, helping those who need help the most. Recently, in the area on the border of Rwanda and Uganda, the M23, which is a radical group that is fighting the DRC government and army, has taken control of that area, and there were 110,000 or more displaced and refugees combined who were forced to flee. And, as terminology might have it, the M23 said that they can voluntarily voluntarily leave the camps. Of course, when an armed militia comes in and tells you can voluntarily leave, you know what that means. And then what they did was, as the people started to move, they disassembled the structures that had been built by the church and other organizations to help the people, and telling them to go back to their villages, which are, in the middle of violence and this civil war that doesn't seem to end.
Right. And this is the region that you were saying, I think previously, and I might have even heard it in the news, surprisingly, that even though the officials are saying that it's not tribal, it's not religious, but you're pretty sure that it is religiously motivated or ethnically motivated?
It is religious in that the group, the M23, are essentially a Marxist rebel group that are push sort of an atheistic philosophy. So they go against the Christian groups just on the basis of that. So DRC, as well as most of that area, is very Christian. And it is broken up between, say, the Catholic Church and some of the other Christian denominations. But it is Christian, and other people, the poor people who are being affected, are almost all Christian. It's just a matter of... Go ahead, I'm sorry. Sorry
to interrupt. How difficult is it for Aid to the Church in Need to provide aid to that region?
It is as difficult as it is for the church, which means that they are affected directly by the military juntas, the activity, but they stay there. So what we have to do is we have to be very sort of interactive and proactive at the same time by helping places close to the areas of displaced camps to help the people who are fleeing as they move. And then, of course, in assuming that they will move to more safe spots, go to areas where they might congregate later. And so the local church, the cardinal has been very helpful to give us information. And whenever they ask for help, in specific ways, whether it's supporting the religious communities who stay or the programs for women and children who are always the most vulnerable.
Okay, well, thank you for that. We'll keep DRC in our prayers as always. Things have changed in Syria since we spoke last.
Yes, dramatically and maybe tenuously. The government has been changed. The Assad regime has been displaced. We have a new, maybe repackaged government that has definite ISIS entanglements, if not allegiances.
Really?
So there is both hopefulness and fear from the Christians, because they hope that with this new opportunity that there can be changes. But obviously there's a fear that there's a promise of one thing and an active, government of another means. So it might be reminiscent of the fall of Egypt when the Muslim Brotherhood came in, took over and guaranteed Christians everything, and then as soon as it came time to put them in place, didn't have it. And that government had to be displaced as well in Egypt.
Right.
So now it's a matter of forming a constitution with promises that all parties would be represented. So the Christian community is being useful and hopeful, but at the same time very wary of what might happen. So we have to be praying for them, because the church is definitely helping keep the people at peace and provided for. The situation in the economy is terrible. Inflation is really high. Opportunities for income is very low.
Right.
And of course, the small communities are hurt the most.
What's the Christian percentage in Syria?
That's hard to say. I mean, it was as high as 10%, at the turn of the century. Right now, it could be anywhere from 2% to 3 to 5%. It's hard to know because of the movement of the peoples.
Right. And since the Assad government has fallen, have a lot of the refugees or the people who have been displaced, are they coming back? Are they able to come back to Syria?
Well, there's movement. Unfortunately, the place that they most often go, Lebanon, is in disrepair. Nice term to put it. So it is a constant flux. There are some movement of people back, but it's not been of great numbers. But there are a lot of people who will leave when given the opportunity to go to a safe haven outside the region.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, we continue praying for Syria. Finally, I know that you wanted to tell us about something exciting that's happening in May.
This is a Jubilee year, and
Yep.
Aid to the Church in Need is hosting a pilgrimage from
Okay.
May 6th through the 15th in Rome to celebrate the Jubilee year. And you can go to the website for ACN Canada for the information on how you can register by March 8th. And it is an all-inclusive package from Montreal back and forth.
Okay, so all-inclusive in May. Deadline is March 8th.
Yeah.
From Montreal, but you don't have to be in Canada to join the pilgrimage as long as you can get to
fly
Montreal.
into Montreal
Exactly.
and make the connection. So it's open to U.S. as well as Canadian
Okay,
residents.
so that's good. So that'll be
Yeah.
we'll put the link on our website, but it's the Canadian Aid to the Church in Need website,
Right.
acn-canada.org. Ed, thank you. Thank you so much. It's nice to end with a positive note.
Absolutely.
Maybe a lot of people will want to join that pilgrimage. I wish I could.
Yeah.
I wish I could, but maybe another time. And
Next Jubilee.
yes, the next Jubilee. Yeah, I should be around by then. And then and thanks for the updates on the DRC and Syria. We'll keep them and your work in our prayers as always.
You're welcome, Deacon. It's good to be with you.
Yes. Ed Clancy is the Director of Outreach for Aid to the Church in Need USA. You can find out more about Aid to the Church in Need in the U.S., churchinneed.org, and in Canada. That's where you can also find out about that pilgrimage, acn-canada.org.
Hey, this is Ali Aaliyah, musician and speaker, and you're listening to the Salt and Light Hour with Deacon Pedro.
You can watch Salt and Light Television and listen to the Salt and Light Hour on our streaming platform, Salt and Light Plus, SL Plus, downloaded at your favorite app store. And now it's time for Windows to the Soul with Sister Marie Paul Curley, sister. So Conclave.
Yes, I was fascinated to hear about a movie being done on a conclave, and I know it's dealing with all the mysterious process that none of us are privy to unless we're cardinals electing a pope. So it's gotten a lot of attention.
Yes.
A lot of people have gone to see it. I think when it streams, a lot of people are going to be watching it, and it's probably already streaming, actually.
I think it is. I think it is.
I don't know if it's going to win the Big Picture Oscar.
How did it do with the Golden Globes? I'm putting you on the spot.
You are. I actually did not. I don't remember.
I have to say that. So I did watch it, and I actually watched it in the theaters. It was an excuse to go out and watch it. There's nothing like the big screen experience.
Sure.
I was a little surprised at how many awards, like it's just nominated for everything.
It is. And honestly, I think it deserves a Best Actor award with Ralph Fiennes.
Yeah, that's it.
He's really good.
He's
really good. That's the only award I would
That's
give.
the only one, yeah.
But honestly, as you watch the show, you think he's a cardinal. Like he's so
absolutely,
he
and all I
the role so brilliantly.
All I kept thinking was like, this is the same guy. This is Voldemort. I thought so. Voldemort, and then yes, I truly believe that he was a cardinal, a bishop, a true man of the church. Yes.
Yeah, he brings a gravitas and a solemnity to the whole process, and you're rooting for a good pope to be elected because you're seeing everything through his eyes.
Yes.
So I think in that way, the film is a great success. I also think that it is a great depiction of a group of probably mostly well-intentioned men coming together to choose a new leader. That's what I feel this film does very, very well. And if that's all you're expecting of it, then it's a great film.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for a film on the church, it's really a missed opportunity because there's all these things that are looked at and thought about and prayed about at a conclave that that's totally missing. It's the discussion between the different cardinals is either political or they're all political. Yeah. Or it's about how can I get the votes? I mean, really, it's just out there like that.
Yeah.
What did you think about it?
Well, I completely agree with you. And you got to wonder if everything that happens inside a conclave is secret, the person who wrote I think it's a book initially.
It's a novel.
It's a novel, right? So it's obviously made up. I mean, like, how do we know? I know I know from cardinals, actually, that the spirit of a conclave is very prayerful. And this is something that was completely lacking in the film. At the same time, I thought that it was amazing how it was made to feel like a thriller. You kind of alluded to that, even though there's really nothing going on. I mean, there's nothing really it's like, okay, so we're electing a pope, but it really felt like a whodunit. Like it was like almost like a mystery thriller, like who's around the corner.
Yeah.
So I think that was
it's a strength of the film.
It was a strength of the filmmakers, of the director.
It really keeps you engaged. It's well written. It's paced so brilliantly. It's edited well. The cinematography is great.
Beautiful.
They get all these details about conclaves, like external details, like right on. As one of the sisters said, well, they get the paraphernalia of the church completely correct. Yeah. It's the other part that's missing, like the conversation, the spiritual conversation, the homily that is so highly praised in the film that Ralph Fiennes gives.
Yes,
is not shown to be given during a mass. There's no altar. There's no
it's bizarre.
It's a speech, not a homily.
Yes.
So of course, if they're discerning with the Holy Spirit who is being called to lead the church, of course they would be praying all the time, and I think their conversations would be much more interesting than like a one beat who's quote conservative and who's quote liberal.
Exactly.
I think they'd be talking about what are the most important urgent needs of the church, of the people of God.
No, and
what kind of qualities are we looking for?
No, that's the truth. That a cardinal or bishops, they know that these right and left divisions are political. They do not apply to the church. There's no such thing as a right-wing Catholic or a left-wing Catholic. Either you're Catholic or you're not. So this idea, it's the same thing as the two popes. It propagates the idea that the right, quote unquote, is outdated and anything that's traditional is bad, quote unquote. And liberal is what the church needs, and we need to be more, liberated from I don't know what. And so it's kind of, that's a myth that people who are not in the church believe, because that's how the church is portrayed in the media.
Yeah. I do feel that even Catholic media to some extent falls into that, some Catholic media, and it's really important to try not to do that, because then you're polarizing, you're taking sides. And the church is a place for truly everyone to be saved by Jesus Christ. So the spirituality and the whole understanding of the church as the body of Christ is really missing from the film for the most part. I mean, and of course the ending, are we going to do the spoiler? The ending was really problematic.
I do not have a problem spoiling the ending, because the ending spoiled the whole movie for me.
Yes, and a couple of the sisters felt the same way.
Completely spoiled it.
So obviously it's pushing its own a bit of an agenda in terms of showing, quote, traditional people who believe in tradition bad, people who believe in being liberal good, which is a false division anyway of the church. It's not genuine. And so the Pope, who's the candidate who's actually chosen, is revealed at the very last minute to have, I'm not sure if you say he has a rare intersex condition, which means he's got both male organs and some female organs. And so is it a woman or is it a man who is the next pope? And it's so unrealistic, especially after all the series of scandals that are happening. Every cardinal who comes to the fore is a source of scandal. So, I mean, we do have problems in the church. We are all sinners, and there are scandals in the church, but every candidate that takes a lead in the balloting is a source of scandal. That's a problem with the film right there in terms of its image of the church. And then the candidate who is elected, it has this rare condition. It's an agenda. It feels like an agenda, and it feels so unrealistic.
Completely. I felt the same way, that the whole film, and I did think it's a great script. It was well performed, and it was all just for this one moment. So everything, the 2 hours of the film, completely ruined just because of this moment. And it's irrelevant, because nobody, if this man is elected to be pope, nobody would have known, because they would not have been made public. So it's like, what are they saying? That a woman would be a better pope? I mean, I don't know. Maybe a woman would be a better pope, but not because women are better or because men need to be more in touch with or because cisgender is better than... transgender is better than cis. Like, it's just like this whole. Oh, don't get me started.
So it's a complete misunderstanding of the human person,
completely,
right? And how God created us to be. So I really feel so. Two things make this very a sad movie. It's a sad commentary. Number one, that the filmmakers who did so much research completely misunderstand what the church is.
Yeah.
That's a real problem. And I don't know how much of that responsibility is on the filmmakers and how much of that responsibility lies with the church and how we communicate who we are. I think, the theme for this year's World Communications Day is a paraphrase of the first letter of St. Peter: share with gentleness the hope that is in your hearts. So how can we, as Catholics, share that hope? How can we share the hope that is Christ? Because we failed to do that we failed to communicate that to the mainstream filmmakers who made this film about the church. So, it's not a bad film to see, but it's problematic on so many levels. It does not represent what the church is at all, or really what happens at a conclave in many respects.
Exactly. So you're right. It's a great film to watch. Just don't watch it to inform yourself about what the church is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Yes. Yeah.
Deacon Pedro, I have can I just add?
Yes.
I saw this little film.
Okay.
It's called No Address. It's It's an independent film, a small film that is actually, it's a bit of a message film. So it can be a bit on the nose in place. It's releasing in the United States on February 28th, but it's a little powerful film about the tragic reality of homelessness, but it does so in a surprising way. It reveals not just the tragedy, but also the profound humanity of those who are living on the street. It shows that society may have given up on them, but they don't give up on each other. It's a very powerful little film. And if you're in the States, because I don't think it's out in Canada, but if you're in the States and you're going to the theater, it's a very powerful film. It is rated PG-13. It's dealing with some of the brutality that's on the streets when someone is homeless, the vulnerability. But then it shows the goodness of humanity with the people on the street with each other and the people who reach out to try to make up for what has happened to the small encampment there. Okay,
No Address?
No Address.
Thank you for telling us about it. Yes. Is it, you said it's an independent film. Is it a Christian film?
It's not overtly, maybe it is. I will say that Christian groups come out looking really good in this film. But the message is really about homelessness, how anyone can be homeless, and how they deserve the respect that every person deserves. It's powerful. I
will look it up. Yes.
Check it out. Check it out.
No Address, and then Conclave. Let's see how it does at the Academy Awards. Thank you, sister, for that. That was a great. It was good to chat with you about that film. I've been wanting to do that for a while. Thank you.
I hope it's helpful.
Yes, me too. Sister Marie Paul Curley. She's with the Congregation of the Daughters of St. Paul. You can read her blog at windowstothesoul.wordpress.com and also follow her at Sister M. Paul. Coming up in our second half hour, a featured chat with Father Mark Mary Ames of the Rosary in a Year podcast and Canadian singer-songwriter John Dawson. So stay tuned. Welcome to the Salt and Light Hour Part 2. I'm Deacon Pedro. I suspect that most of you are familiar with the Bible in a Year podcast and also with the Catechism in a Year podcast. Now Ascension Press has a new podcast. This one is The Rosary in a Year, hosted by Father Mark Mary Ames of the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal. If you struggle with building the habit of prayer, not just praying the Rosary, this podcast is for you. And to tell us more and to explain how it works, I'm now joined by Father Mark Mary Ames. Father Mark Mary, welcome back to the Salt and Light Hour.
Thank you, good deacon. Great to be back with you again.
Yes, it's good to see you. I was thinking, because last time we spoke about the habits of holiness, and now this is almost kind of like the habits of prayer, correct?
Yeah, that's a great way to see it. Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's not just, because when I first heard about it, I thought, what, are we going to like listen to Father Mark Mary pray the rosary with us every day? That's not really what the podcast is.
No, I love to think of it as it's really like a course in prayer with the rosary being both our textbook and our classroom, a little bit of our gym as well. And so certainly it is focused on the rosary and using the rosary, but really I think at its heart is it's teaching people and accompanying people in prayer.
Okay, so that's good. So then to clarify then, it is helping people build habits of prayer, not helping us learn how to pray the rosary better necessarily.
I think that will be the outcome.
Okay.
But it's not its only aim. Or I think the bigger thing is it's not just praying the rosary together. It's really breaking apart the prayers, beginning with prayer itself, looking at the prayers, and then a lot of time on the mysteries. So is it,
because I think that it's a little easier to understand, the Bible in the year. Okay, so we get to read a little bit, talk about it, something different every year. But with this, so you called it it's a lesson, a bit of a gym. So there's workouts. Does it work that you give a lesson in prayer to help us build our habits? How does exactly, like, what does each podcast look like?
Yeah.
Each session look like?
Yeah, great. And I think it's probably, we can maybe think of it as digging more than running. Like Rosary in the Year, Catechism in the Year. It's like there's a start and there's a finish, right? It's very clear going through the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Rosary in the Year, it's an ongoing going deeper in prayer and in the particular mysteries of our faith. So again, the first week, it's broken up into 6 phases. The first one is really an introduction to prayer as well, a little bit on like what we could call the practice of the presence of God. And then the next phase is going through the prayers themselves. And so we'll have 3 episodes on the Hail Mary, 5 on the Our Father, the Sign of the Cross, really from the angle of like, how do we pray with this?
Okay. So sorry. Okay. And you call them phases. Can you unpack that a little bit more?
So it's just like, that's kind of the language that Ascension helped put with it of like from the start to the finish. Like, so there's phase 1, which is the introduction, which is about a week. Phase 2 is about 20 days. Phase 3 is going to be a couple of months. And because with each one, kind of the focus changes a little bit. And so that's kind of the language we've used.
So is the idea, because you did say that, so the initial, or the, I guess, outcome will be that we will be praying the rosary better at the end of the year. So is the idea that if you spend some time with the Lord's Prayer and some time with the Hail Mary, that is helping us enter into those prayers deeper, so that it doesn't just become a recitation, which is kind of like where I'm at when I pray the rosary?
Yeah, and like kind of the image I use is sometimes it's like, pretend you're at St. Peter's Basilica and you only had 15 minutes at a time, and the whole time you're trying to take in the whole thing. It's gonna be a good experience, but it's also gonna be helpful to have some time where it's like, today I'm just gonna sit with the Pietà, And so that's the idea. It's like we're going through it somewhat slowly and focused at the service of really allowing things to go deep.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good analogy for me, being like a visual learner, because I find that's my struggle with the rosary, that I find like it's like, okay, I'm praying offering the rosary for this intention, and then I have to focus on the mystery and try to enter into the mystery through the eyes of Mary, and then pay attention to the words of the prayer, and I just can't do all those things at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another kind of image I think of, like, really when we're talking about praying with the mysteries and meditating on the mysteries, I think the image or the idea really is meant to be like going back to places we've already been, as opposed to discovering like a place anew while we're doing it, and because sometimes it's like, okay, we're doing so much as we're praying the rosary and we're supposed to meditate, and that's really hard. But if we've had some time of just praying and going deep with the mysteries, we've already had some like real deep impact with them, now when we're doing it all together, it's just like going back to an old memory, which I think is much, much easier.
Absolutely. Now, again, and I hate to always be making the comparison with the Bible and the Catechism, but I think that's what our listeners will be familiar with. The Bible, there's a book. The Catechism, there's a book. So it makes sense that your podcast also comes with a book, this Rosary in a Year prayer guide. Can you explain how that works? And Do I need to follow the guide as I'm listening to the podcast? Could I just use the guide and not listen to the podcast? Can you explain a little bit about how the guide can be helpful?
Yeah, I think all of those options are valid. Is like what I'm going to be doing is, as much as possible, making it fruitful for folks who don't have the guide, right?
Okay.
At the same time, there's going to be sections where we're looking at saint writings. And so the guide has the whole saint writing.
Right.
I'm going to read an excerpt and reflect on it. So if you're just using the guide, you'll get the whole excerpt. Mm-hmm. You won't get the added sort of reflection. Mm-hmm. The one where the rubber really hits the road is that we're going to spend some time with sacred art. And so I do think it's really helpful to actually have the art to be able to look at.
Nice. I did notice that actually, because I do have the guide, and I was intrigued by, because it's not just one go at each mystery, but it's like 3 or 4 times. There's like, I've never knew that there was so much sacred art on the crucifixion or on the wedding of Cana or whatever the particular mystery is. So there's a little bit of Lectio Divina, there's a little bit of Visio Divina in terms of the art. And as you said, then all these sessions through the phases are helping us go deeper into the individual prayers or the mysteries, so that our praying of the Rosary doesn't become rote recitation.
Sure, yeah.
Is that fair?
That's great. And at the same time, kind of simultaneously, we're going to be slowly increasing the amounts that we're praying at a time.
Okay.
Right?
Explain that, please.
And this is the gym aspect. Because I think for a lot of us today, the reality is like sitting down and concentrating for 15 minutes at a time is actually a little bit difficult.
It is.
And so, especially for those who are beginners, but also those who want to kind of like get back to the basics, is we're going to slowly build up till at the end we are praying the full Rosary together, and that's like the last month of the podcast.
Okay, so for the first couple phases, you're only maybe doing a Lord's Prayer, 3 Hail Marys, and a Glory Be kind of thing.
So yeah, exactly. It's like Our Father, 3 Hail Marys, Glory Be, and then we get into a decade, and then we're going to slowly get into 2 decades, etc.
Okay, I understand. Okay, that's good to know. So would you say that this is, I mean, I know that you probably will say that this is for everybody who wants to deepen their prayer life. So if people feel like, oh, I'm already got the Rosary, I pray the Rosary every day anyway, is it for them? Is it for people who struggle with the Rosary? Who would you recommend this to?
To be honest, I do think that the genius of the Rosary in Your podcast comes from the genius of the Rosary itself, is that it's a beautiful and fruitful prayer for the 6-year-old or the 7-year-old and like Padre Pio. Like you can, it always kind of meets you where you're at, and there is always a space to go deeper. I designed it kind of for the young me, thinking about my own experience as an 18-year-old. Okay. And I'm doing it as, a religious of nearly 20 years. And I'm finding it very fruitful for myself at this point, even though I've had the daily habit for, more than a decade.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So in a way, that is like Scripture, that it's alive. It's always speaking to us, no matter where we are in our life. So maybe just the last question, and maybe this is just reflecting on me, because I'm one of those people who thinks like, I can pray. I love doing the office, morning prayer, eating prayer. Do I really need to pray the Rosary? What would you say to that person?
Yeah, my answer is that we do need our Catholic devotion, spirituality to be rooted in objective truth. And the objective truth is that we don't have a moral obligation to pray in the Rosary or the daily Rosary. Nonetheless, because it is in the category of devotionals, I do think it's somewhat of like the queen of devotionals, and that you don't want to just dismiss it lightly. That there's a reason that the Holy Father and so many of our modern saints in particular have had devotions encouraging the Rosary. So I do think it is worth having a part of your regular prayer life, but it's not an universal obligation.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good answer. Good answer.
Appreciate
it. Father Mark Mary, it's so good to see you and to talk with you today. Thank you for putting it together, and thank you to Ascension Presents for hosting it and for telling us about it today, Father.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Appreciate your time.
Father Mark Mary Ames is the Director of Communications and the Director of Priestly Studies of the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal. He's also the host of the Ascension Presents video series, the CFRs, and now he is the host of their new podcast, The Rosary in a Year, which is available wherever you get your podcasts. Here now is John Dawson with Mend My Ways from his new album, Outlier.
I finally found my way back to you, love. I've stumbled on the road to home, but every step's a little bit harder. Still looking for the ends of old days, feeling for the mend in my ways. All the words have somehow faltered. All the things I've said or sung. But at the end of these two arms that hold you, hands that had pushed you away, feeling for the mend in my ways. I'll get over the fear that got a hold of me. I feel older, it's a feeling that has set me free, feeling that has set me free. I'll get over the fear that got a hold of me. I feel older, it's a feeling that has set me free, a feeling that has set me free.
We're listening to John Dawson with Mend My Ways from his new album, Outlier. John Dawson was last on this program in October 2011. I got to know John while working on World Youth Day 2002. By then, he was already a liturgical musician and an accomplished musician in his own right. In 2011, his Mass setting was one of the ones approved by the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops to be used with the new translation of the Missal. Since then, John has continued composing, performing, and teaching, and exploring the relationship between art and the sacred. His new album, Outlier, which we've been listening to, is a great example of this relationship, thoughtful, subtle, and steeped in devotion. To tell us more, I am now joined by John Dawson. John, welcome back to the Salt and Light Hour. It's good to see you.
You too, man. What a lovely, lovely thing you had to say there. Thank you.
Wow. Of course, and it's all true. The most striking part of it is that the last time you were on this show was 2011. That's like 15 years ago.
That was a pretty busy time, if I recall.
That was a pretty busy time. So that's when the new English translation of the Missal, and next thing you know, John Dawson is in every parish across Canada.
I think that's probably actually true. Even if they weren't singing the music, I was in the book.
Yeah. So what was that like for you? What did that feel like? When it really kind of hit you?
Yeah, it was. Man, looking back on it, it is a tremendous honor. It's probably the most important thing I could ever do as a musician is be invited to contribute music to the Mass. I was not prepared for how intense that whole thing was in terms of the varying the various reactions for a lot of reasons. Parish musicians can be very protective, and when they're all of a sudden told they have to do this, sometimes there's resistance. So it was a difficult thing to be associated with something that was basically coming, here, do this, and that So
and
it
coming
was weird
from the bishops. Interesting. Well, I'd love to have that conversation with you in more depth, maybe over a couple beers.
That's about right.
So okay, but tell me something, because when I met you, I don't know, 20 years ago, you were doing Catholic music, but I don't know if you were still doing gigs and secular music and all kinds of stuff. Like you're a musician, that's your thing. When did you start actually thinking about writing sacred music or even liturgical music?
Honestly, I didn't until I really, I was a songwriter, and I'm like, I don't know, man. Not on the bingo card, dude. But I was serving on the National Council for Liturgical Music at the time.
Yeah.
And that was when the idea was put forward by one of the members of the Episcopal Commission for Liturgy. I was there really only as a sort of contemporary music expert. I was a guitar player, worked in youth ministry. I was just bringing a perspective on contemporary music to the liturgical discourse in Canada.
Right.
But when the opportunity came up for some new music, I was like, well, that sounds fun. And they wanted something that was going to be, from a guitarist's perspective as well. So that's how I fell into that. So I am not a liturgical musician by trade. It was, but that was about as big as you can get for an opening gig.
That's true. I'll change the intro now. It's like he's not really a liturgical musician. John Dawson.
Yeah.
But is it fair to say that even your contemporary secular music you do have that, and I said it in the intro, that sort of relationship with the sacred.
Yes.
Like it's not it's not religious music, but it's not sacred music. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's music. It's the same way. I don't, make Catholic dinners or, read like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I am who I am, but I make it with love and I make it out of service and it becomes an act of prayer.
Yeah, I get it.
You know what I mean? So the music, I've never really understood this idea that you have to make, it's got to be music you could use at adoration for it to count as Catholic music.
Yeah,
the whole album is full of little sacramental nods. Mend to My Ways, uses baptismal imagery, reconciliatory imagery. Have a Little Faith is the last song.
Of course.
And so while there's not always anything explicit, I view the act of making music as a form of prayer in a sense, and it's a response to a gift I was given, and I take it very seriously as a craft, and I feel like there's a lot of there's a service to even writing music that can help people see something beautiful or remind them, have a little faith, hang on, things that I meant to say, talking about my kids. There's a kind of St. John Paul II there always talked about the spirituality of artistic service. And to me, I can still be of service as an artist and as a Catholic musician, even if I'm not writing 1,000 psalm settings. You know what I mean?
But it's not like you think, somebody might hear my song at the bar and it might be that thing that they need to hear because they're struggling with their faith.
Yeah, it absolutely might. Yeah. It might. But again, it's whatever. My primary job as a Catholic is to be responsible to the people in my life that the Lord has put in front of me. And I have my wife, I have my children, and that, the music is like if it serves that purpose as from an evangelical angle, awesome. If not, I guess that's okay too. You know what I mean?
I have this conversation, and as I'm sure you do, with Catholic musicians all the time. And I guess in a way, because it's not your typical praise and worship or liturgical music, it's actually more accessible, and you might be reaching, not preaching to the choir. And I think that there's a place for that, obviously.
Yeah.
Why Outlier?
Well, I think the idea of Outlier was a suggestion from my producer, and I think the idea is that I don't really play, and again, the definition of an outlier, is somebody who's kind of outside of that norm of activity, and they kind of, we with this album, we did everything ourselves. We had it mastered in Wisconsin, but we weren't really out looking to get the industry's attention or anything. We put in all of the resources ourselves because we believed in the music, and the music itself is kind of sits in some cracks and spots. It's like it goes slight jazz direction at times, folk direction. It's just kind of its own thing. The music is kind of its own thing. The songs are coming from a very earnest place, and I think it has an authenticity that, and I wouldn't say it's about everything for sure, but it's not necessarily common in a lot of music, to have that kind of vulnerable authenticity. It's not uncommon, But I think that's what makes Outlier special, you know?
Yeah, like it doesn't sound, and I don't mean this in a bad way, like it doesn't sound produced. Like it doesn't sound overproduced. It's very raw,
it's not calculated.
very acoustic.
Yeah,
It's like you actually sitting at the bar playing, and every once in a while a few other musicians join in. And,
pretty much. Yeah, it's almost exactly how it goes.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So Outlier, you'd say, kind of describes the whole kind of collection, because there's no track that's called Outlier.
No.
In that sense. But it does kind of summarize what you think the whole thing together is.
I think so. The album actually follows a bit of a story, and it moves. It actually, the structure of it's kind of inspired by the Old Testament scholar Walter Brueggemann.
Okay.
He talked about the Psalms. He talked about this idea of orientation to disorientation to surprising reorientation. It's not like the 3-act or the hero's journey.
Yeah, interesting.
And you can see that it begins in a very simple place of life came to me. It's like the Shire and Lord of the Rings. But once you've gone, the bottom kind of falls out at the end of the first side. And then through the end of it, it's sort of a study in resilience and a reminder to hope. And that's like, so a psalm, Psalms of Lament follow that structure.
Interesting.
And so it is kind of modeled on it. So when you talk about, just to your point of not being explicitly Catholic, there is something very inherently biblical about the way, at least
even
in my mind, the
together.
structure of it. Right.
So is it, I mean, would you say it's like a thematic album that people are meant to listen to it from beginning to end?
I wouldn't say meant to, but I notice, and I've noticed since we made it, it is a really nice record to just listen to front to back. It feels like a journey. Yeah. But all of the songs in isolation, 100%, I think, enjoy them as you shuffle away. But I think the people who decide to listen to the album front to back, I think they'd be surprised at how it holds together in its own way. It's a bit like you live a lifetime. You live life, innocence into death. Yeah. You know, having kids and talking to them. By the end of it, I'm just sitting back talking to my kids and have a little faith. You know, listen, I went through all this stuff. But don't worry. Yeah. So there is a story there. You know, it wasn't beautiful. Like I didn't sit down going, this is going to be a story. Just as we were looking at the songs, it was like,
it just felt
the only one I did that was Life Just Came to Me. The opening track, I was like, I need to start simple there. That was actually intentional. And then the rest of it, we just kind of pieced together. And we look back at it, it was like, wow, that's really cool. Like
that is very cool. Yeah. Okay, I did listen to the whole thing beginning to end.
I know you did.
As I was doing other things, but it's not the same to sit like with headphones on the couch and just listen. That's also an experience itself.
For a treat.
Yeah, I'm going to do that, and I encourage our listeners to go and get the album and put on some headphones and experience it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Adam Bruner, the producer, sorry to cut you off, but Adam Bruner, the producer, did a tremendous job with the mix. Like if you listen to it, it's a lovely experience.
I know. I did notice that too as well. It's like, wait, is like are my headphones off? Why is the left side? Yeah.
No, it's very
John,
well
it's so good. I'm so glad that this album came together and that
thanks,
it was. I mean, if anything, an excuse to get to talk to you on this program.
Yeah, I've missed you, man. It's been a while.
Let's hope it's not another 15 years.
We've talked sooner than that, haven't we?
Yeah, no, I know we have, but
we should make a habit of it more.
We should absolutely, and I'm sure that we will in person, and we can have that beer. And
we got a lot to unpack there.
Yes, exactly. Well, John Dawson, thank you so much for joining us today and for telling us a little bit about your new album, Outlier.
Thanks, Pedro.
You can listen to John Dawson's music and his new album, Outlier, on all streaming platforms, and you can find him on your socials at John Dawson Music. Here now to take us out is John Dawson with Things That I Meant to Say, from his new album, Outlier.
Rest assured, I will greet you when the morning comes. Rest assured that I will kiss you when the daylight's done. With me here, you're not so all alone. With me here, you're not so all alone. Rest assured, for all it gives you, the world can take as much. rest assured that it can't take from you what's given you in love. Though my love for you is yours and yours alone. Remember, love freely shown is freely grown. Now I know that this conversation is more than a few years away, but it'll break my heart if those years come and go, and I'm just left with a list of things that I meant to say.
We're listening to John Dawson with Things That I Meant to Say from his new album, Outlier, and that will take us to the end of our program today. You can listen to the full show on our website, slmedia.org, or subscribe to the Salt and Light Hour Catholic Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You can also listen to this program on the Salt and Light Plus app. That's also where you can easily watch Salt and Light TV and all our videos and documentaries. Just download the Salt and Light Plus app, SL Plus. This week, let's build those habits of prayer. Let's pray for the Democratic Republic of Congo, for Syria, and also for Lebanon, Gaza, the West Bank, Israel, and let's not forget to pray for peace in Ukraine. I also pray that you have a wonderful beginning to the Lenten season. I'm Deacon Pedro. Thank you for being with us. This has been the Salt and Light Hour.
I will greet you as long as mornings come. And rest assured, I will love you until my